Evolution. So evolution is a change in populations over time. It happens through natural selection. The best traits make more babies, obviously with some nuance and mutation and stuff. So I talk about sexual selection here, as well as natural selection and things like mutations and genetic drift, which are all included in this type of thing. Proof of evolution can be seen through homologous structures, such as a human's hand and a whale's tailbone, or you can even see it through analogous structures, which basically are structures that don't come from the same organism or don't have any relation, I guess, but serve the same purpose. An example would be a fly's wings and a bird's wings. Obviously, though, like it's a little bit difficult to classify whether it was homologous or whether something is homologous or analogous. Because how do you determine they came from the same fossil record, or came from the same organism, or came through the same organism a few years back? That's a little bit hard to classify, but it's kind of an assumption that you make when doing so. There's also another classification, but we could talk about that later. So before Darwin came along, Aristotle proposed the idea of fixed species, the idea that species don't change. Creationists and like religions like Christianity take this to mean that God created the animals the way they're supposed to be, which is essentially just a different version of fixed species. Jean-Baptiste Lamarck proposed, and he's someone, I don't know what year, but he proposed that traits change by disuse or use, essentially stating that, like, if you dye your hair, then your baby will have that hair color, or if you work out, then your baby will be super strong, which obviously is not true because genetic evolution is the study of the change of populations, not the change in individuals. So, Darwin's ideas after studying finches on the Galapagos Islands, if you guys don't know about that, you should look that up. It's basically he observed different beak sizes, and over time, he began to see how evolution um, and genetic variations acted within that population. So, the truth of natural selection is that best traits are more likely to reproduce. Obviously, this isn't true for sexual selection because traits that favor reproduction matter more than traits that favor survivability. For example, if an organism can make 500 babies, yet 400 or yet all those babies are deformed or something, it doesn't matter because of the vast amount of babies that the organism is creating. Essentially, whatever creates the most babies is or has the most fertility, or maybe like an organism can fertilize so many different other animals at once, then that is what is favored slightly more than natural selection, which is essentially like the strongest survive, like survival of the fittest. Natural selection only works on existing traits, not random. Humans can't grow wings unless, and I put unless here because there's something called mutations, where obviously maybe it's possible that over time, like mutations can make humans grow like a third eye or something, but obviously that's highly unlikely. And it only works on existing traits for the most part. Well, natural selection only works on existing traits. So, for example, a plant can't survive without water. It will never adapt to be able to survive without water. It can adapt to survive with less water, but it can't eliminate the need for water completely. It requires variation, and it leads to extinction. Where's variation and leads to extinction? I'm not sure why it leads to extinction, but maybe there's some reason for that. So 5 mechanisms of evolution: natural selection, mutation, gene flow, movement between populations, so like migration. Like for example, an example would be uh, like like Europeans coming to the Americas and sharing their genes with the native people. And sexual selection and genetic drift. Genetic drift is essentially a random change in allele. This could be due to the bottleneck effect, which means let's say an asteroid comes along and destroys all the dinosaurs, and there's a few left that survive. Those few will have very little genes to share, but they will do so anyways. And the founder effect is when um, you see the population from a few individuals. So, like, people feel like they need to reproduce due to the lack of individuals. And that can lead to a very, very constricted and specific gene variety. Sexual selection is obviously mate choice. There's two types, but they're not very important. I don't know why my teacher actually mentioned them. But there's one where it's like and like, which means that a person will go for someone like them, and or not a person, an organism, and um, and the other one is that the person will go for the highest that they can get. Um, so essentially, whichever is the most attractive based off their preferences. So this is a Hardy-Weinberg equation. I'm not too sure about because this is a simplified version. The actual version requires a quadratic, and I think it's p squared plus 2pq plus. So it's just I think it's p plus q squared equals 1 actually, which is I guess the same thing because it's just square rooted on both sides. But it essentially is used to describe like the ratios, I believe, and the equation essentially states that if the allele frequencies stay the same, no evolution can occur. So the math here isn't really necessary because you just have to understand what the Hardy-Weinberg equation is, and it's just used to measure evolution. So adaptive radiation is there are many species from one ancestor. So like that would mean like speciation, like for example, well, I'm not too sure of any specific examples because can't think of any on top of my head, but that is true. There are two types of speciation: allopatric, which is separated by location, and sympatric, which is same place but become different behavior slash genetics. So there are 5 examples here, like reproductive isolation, which is actually like one example of isolation, but there's 5 classifications. There's temporal, mate at different times. What if one prefers to mate at night and one prefers to mate in the morning? And not just preferences either. Sometimes you can only mate at night, and sometimes an organism can only mate in the morning. In that case, those organisms will never be able to mate, or will likely not be able to mate. Ecological is that they live in different habitats. It's pretty logical. They'll never meet. Behavioral is different mating behaviors. Like for example, like some birds do dances. Like I don't know if a peacock is necessarily one of them, though I do know they flaunt their feathers. They do dances in order to attract other women or other female um, counterparts. But if the female counterparts don't recognize the dance or don't believe it to be or don't recognize the dance, they won't mate because they don't recognize it. Maybe it's the same species, or they don't recognize it as worthy, to mate. And mechanical is just that the body parts don't fit. That's pretty logical. Um, and gamete is, let's say that some miracle that they do manage to come together, the sperm and egg can't fuse. Yeah, that's essentially all that happens. For example, mules are actually part of the gamete reproductive isolation. So I think you have to breed a specific type of horse and a donkey to get a mule, I believe. And fertilization happens, but there can be an inviable cause, which is that the offspring dies or infertile, can't reproduce, like mules, like I said. There's also breakdown where the offspring is weak or defective. So like I think there's new scientific breakthroughs on creating babies with bone marrow, but obviously the offspring is going to be weak and defective. So that's one of the examples of post-zygotic fertilization, issues with post-zygotic fertilization. So that's it.